Hi everybody, and welcome back to this scalar training series on parsing. The next thing that we're going to be talking about, which is the meat of really parsing, are formats. So let's take a look at some live examples of formats. And what we're going to be doing for this, for the rest of the series, is we're going to be referencing our documentation directly, and we're going to basically be going through the docs. So as you're going through the docs, this series should be able to support you in that and maybe give you some more context and more examples. So in order to get to the docs, just go to your account here, select docs here, and parser docs are here in the link. So we're going to basically go through all of these docs in this entire series. And the first thing that we're going to be starting off with are line formats. So before we get into line formats, let's talk about a little bit of the tools that you have available to you to actually parse. And the first tool that you have available to you is this log parser editor here. And what this does is when you click on it and you've logged into your account, it gives you the ability to do free text here. And it allows you to test parsers just using free text. So you could cut and paste your log lines here, and then you could test the formats, and then we can paste it into the actual configuration file. That is one of two parser testing tools that you have available to you. The second one can be found directly from the parsers page. So if you click on the drop down here and you go to parsers, it's going to list a page of parsers. The way that parsers get added here are when you add them to your agent and logs are shipped with the key or the attribute parser. So like parser is Docker or parser is access log within your agent, and logs are shipped, then that parser will show up here. We have some built-in ones and we have custom ones, and you're able to edit them directly here. So if we go into one of these parsers and we select edit, this is going to take us to the second parser editor tool. And this one's a little bit more robust than this one. This one just takes free text, whereas this one actually gives you a log sample. And it also gives you a couple other options. It gives you the ability to filter log examples using our using Scalar's syntax or Scalar search syntax. So things like this would actually work. Message contains 33. It's gonna pull anything with the word with 33 in it. Free text search, for instance, it's gonna pull everything with June. So yeah, so I think you get the point. It is a full filter, and then these are logs that are being shipped directly with that parser to find as well. The other thing that is really useful about this particular parser editor tool are the logs. So when you actually run a parser, you could test it, and you could do the same here as well. You could test parsers. But you can tell what the system, how the system actually processed it, i.e. how the system was thinking when it processed each individual line. So if you click on a line here, it's going to basically give you all the logs on how the regex was actually interpreted here. So it could help you immensely in troubleshooting and building parsers a lot quicker. So those are some tools that are available to you within the parser. Those are some parser tools that are available to you. So now let's actually get into parsing a real live example. That is an access log. So let's go back to our parser documentation, and we're going to be studying line formats here. And let's take this first line here, and we're going to parse it. So we're just going to paste that directly here. And this is a simple access log. And let's first talk about the anatomy of the parsing syntax here. So if you look at the documentation here, the first thing that's going to show you is that you could build a simple format here just with quotes. So there's actually two options here. You could actually put a format here like this as just like a string. Or you can also do a format that is an object as well. And I think that confuses some people. So this is the object version, and this is the string version. The object version has more options here. The string version literally just lets you define the actual format, and then you could define many formats if you wanted. The object version, as we can see here, will allow you to define the same format rule, but it also gives you a bunch more options, which we'll get through. My personal preference is to always use this object, just because it gives you more options, but it's not necessarily required. So you can see that this is kind of how this would work, and things are evaluated top down. So let's remove these, and we're just going to get started with a single format in the object form here. And let's talk about the first thing here. We have ID, which is basically a Boolean. So I primarily use these when I'm building the tester, or when I'm building the parser. And this is primarily just to identify what things were actually, where things are actually being matched. It's also useful if you want to tag a line with true or false as well as a Boolean. That is also another use case for it, but primarily it's used for testing. Okay, so I'm just going to remove, actually, let's keep that and we'll see how that actually works. So this is our basic format here. So let's just test this and see what it actually does. And actually, let's just simplify this. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pull in one field here, and a field is denoted by $signs here. So string in between $signs is going to pull a field. And let's see what this does. So it's going to do field 1, and field 1 is going to match the entire line. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, if you put the $sign or if you put the variable directly next to the quote, that's going to be implicit start. And then if you put it at the end $sign at the end, then that's going to be implicit end, just in terms of regular expressions. So that's the first thing. Next thing is that fields are evaluated until they see the next regular expression here. So in this case, there was no regular expression here other than the implicit end. So it's just basically pulled everything until the end. But if I were to put something here, and anything we put here is interpreted as a regular expression, whether that be literals or actual regex syntax, those are going to be placed outside of the variables here. So if I do something like this, so if I do field 1 and then space, field 1 and then space like that, then what that's going to do is it's going to grab field 1 here until it sees whatever is here. So it's going to grab field 1 and then it's going to see the next space here, and then that's what it grabbed, was this. So the next thing that we can do are more regular expressions. So we could do dash and then dash. And then let's see what that does. So I did dash, dash, space. Oh, it's because I put 2 spaces here. So actually, one thing that you could also do is you could do the literal space, or you can do space like that in regular expression syntax, and then make sure that you're double escaping. So we can see that it's still matching this regular expression on the side, and let's do the next one. So then now we have a literal bracket here, and that's what I wrote in here. And then the next thing that we're going to do is let's grab a timestamp. And then something very important to note here is the variable name timestamp. Lowercase t, lowercase s, timestamp. This is a system reserved field, and I recommend that you bring it in for every single log line where it's possible. The functionality of this is quite useful in terms of troubleshooting things that are going on with your environment. It's important to pull in the time that the system's reporting, because if you don't pull in the time that the system is reporting, then it's just going to be assigned the time of ingestion. And if you have things that are operating on millisecond transactions, it's really important to have those in order, but there's a high probability that they will be out of order if you don't specifically put in the timestamp here. So what we're doing here is we're pulling this in and we're calling this a timestamp. And what we have is this variable timestamp, and it's kind of aware of what's going on outside of it. So basically, it's going to grab everything within these two brackets here, and it's going to just call that timestamp. And note that we also have a time zone here as well, and we can work with that as well. So if I press test here, what we can see is that so it pulled timestamp, and something also very important to note is this here. So if it recognized the timestamp format, then that is going to tell you when it was parsed. What it also is going to tell you is how it interpreted the time zone, or when this event actually occurred. So since I pasted this from the docs, it's telling me this was quite a few minutes ago. So if you're dealing with your log lines and you're dealing with current lines, it's probably important to see that this was only a few minutes ago and it's not being interpreted as like 7 or 8 hours ago due to some sort of time zone issue. So anyway, so we grabbed the timestamp here, and then the next thing that we're going to do is just keep on going down this line here. So let's do another space, and then a quote. So that'll be a single escaped quote. And then we have method, and we're going to pull that in as a variable. And then we have some sort of URI. And then we have like a version. And then we have an end quote. So let's grab those and see what that does. See, and then now we're grabbing more. So we have format is true, that's coming from this ID. And then we're grabbing basically everything here. And let's call this IP as well. Let's rename that. And let's keep going down the line. This should be status and something like bytes. Or maybe that's time. Yeah, it's called bytes. And then what we can see here is that bytes is basically going to grab until the end because of the, like I said, the implicit end statement. So if I run this, now our parser seems to be working. So we have the URI, we have the method, we have the status, and as more of these come in, and maybe a lot of them are the same, and maybe some of them are not. what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate them sequentially. So it's going to evaluate this against this stanza, and then it's going to evaluate this against this stanza, and then keep going down. The other option that we have here is we could have as many of these stanzas as we want. So one thing to note is that you don't have to grab the whole line in one stanza. And I notice just in my experience with working with these and working with and training people on parsing that a lot of people seem to try to grab the whole line, but it's honestly not necessary. So let's actually split this out, and I'll show you how that would look if we're not grabbing the entire line. So let's just put another stanza in there, and we'll just call that format 2. And one thing we can do is let's have the first stanza just basically looking for the timestamp, the IP and the timestamp. And then the second one will have it looking for everything else. So this should work. Just it's going to start here, and it's going to go all the way to the timestamp. And then if it doesn't see anything else, it'll go to the next one, assuming that it has not been defined as halt. Halt hasn't been defined. And then this one, we actually need to add one more piece here. And that's just this dot star, which is basically a wildcard until it sees this quote here. So it's basically going to look until it sees this quote. And then it's going to start grabbing things all the way to the end. So if I test this again, it's going to do the same thing. But what we can see is that it matched format 1 and it matched format 2. So another thing that we can do here is I could define a halt. So if I were to define a halt, it's going to evaluate this. If it matches, if it actually finds a match, then it's going to stop and it's not going to evaluate this next one. So we can see what happens there. Half of this is going to be cut off. So it's just going to grab the first piece. So this technique can be used in many ways. Sometimes you have dissimilar timestamps coming in, so you can just focus on one or two different fields using a whole format. So if you just want a field that's going to pull in the timestamp, or a few different versions of the timestamp, or the severity or something, this is a really good technique to just pull in single fields and really just focus on those. And it makes it sometimes easier to manage if you're just dealing with, if you just have bite-sized chunks actually, as opposed to full formats. So that is basic formats within Scalar. Stay tuned for the next video where we get a little bit more advanced.